Greetings. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Your support means everything, and if you choose to subscribe to the channel, it would truly make a difference. Now, let's get into the story. I'm Damon. There are betrayals so deep, they fracture your faith in people altogether. What my wife did to me, and to our newborn daughter, wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate, devastating decision that left emotional wreckage in its wake. 10 years later, when she reappeared expecting to reclaim the life she abandoned, she was entirely unprepared for what awaited her. Cassandra and I were married for just over 2 years when she made the decision that upended our lives and tore our family apart. Those early years had felt like a strong foundation, especially after our daughter Gracie was born. Back then, I believed we were building something lasting. Looking back, I can now see the signs I overlooked, signs I wish I had taken more seriously. Cassandra always had a tendency to act on impulse, often putting her own needs first. I saw it at the time, but chalked it up to youth. I assumed she'd grow into her responsibilities as we matured together. The pregnancy wasn't planned, but when she told me, I was thrilled. I embraced fatherhood immediately, diving into books, classes, and preparations for the arrival of our child. Her reaction was the opposite, muted, uncertain, and emotionally distant. She went through the motions of getting ready for the baby, but something was always missing. She talked frequently about feeling trapped, like motherhood was a cage she hadn't signed up for. I tried to comfort her, thinking her fears were just nerves or maybe even symptoms of postpartum anxiety waiting to surface. When Gracie was born, she was everything I had hoped for, healthy, radiant, and full of promise. I believed, perhaps naively, that things would finally settle. I threw myself into fatherhood with everything I had. But Cassandra's connection to motherhood was strained from the start, strained in a way that couldn't be explained by exhaustion or hormones alone. She grew bitter over how much attention the baby required. She often lamented her lost freedom, expressing resentment over how much her life had changed. At first, I thought she was overwhelmed or depressed. I took on more, gave her space, even suggested she talk to a therapist or doctor. Instead of trying to cope, she pulled away, first emotionally, then physically. She began vanishing for long stretches without explanation. Her reasons were vague. She needed air, time to think. But her absences became more frequent, her behavior increasingly erratic. What I didn't realize at the time was that she had reignited a relationship with Garrett, her ex. The same man she swore she had cut ties with was, in fact, never far from her heart or her life, and worse still, he had never stopped pursuing her. The truth hit me with cruel force. One morning seemed like any other. I kissed both Cassandra and Gracie goodbye before heading out for work, unaware that everything was about to collapse. When I returned home, nothing was the same. There, on the doorstep of my home office, sat Gracie's car seat, with my 6-month-old daughter strapped inside. Her diaper bag had been hastily tossed beside her. A short note was tucked inside. Cassandra's words were cold and emotionless. She wrote that she couldn't be a mother, that she was leaving with Garrett, and that she had never stopped loving him. She claimed our marriage had been a mistake, one she was now correcting. Gracie was screaming, terrified, confused, completely alone. That moment, finding my baby abandoned like baggage by her own mother, broke something fundamental inside me. I picked her up, held her close, trying to calm her as the horror of what had just occurred began to sink in. How long had she been sitting there, crying and unattended? It was unthinkable. Cassandra hadn't just left our marriage. She had deserted her own child, with no thought for her well-being or safety. My instinct was to call Cassandra's parents, hoping they'd be horrified and willing to help. I reached out immediately, explained what had happened, and asked if they knew where she'd gone. Their reaction stunned me. Instead of concern or anger, they responded with cold detachment. They told me that Gracie was my responsibility now, and they had no interest in getting involved. That heartless response revealed the truth. Cassandra hadn't become this way by accident. She'd grown up in an environment that treated children like burdens, not blessings. At that moment, it became glaringly clear I was on my own. Cassandra had disappeared without a trace. Her parents had made it clear they were washing their hands of the matter, and I was left to shoulder the burden of raising our daughter alone and rebuilding what was left of my life. Becoming a full-time single parent overnight was staggering. I had to figure out childcare so I could keep my job, master the ins and outs of parenting solo, and explain to friends and family why Cassandra had vanished without warning. But more than the logistics, it was the emotional fallout that nearly broke me. The woman I had once trusted completely, the woman I had married and started a family with, had betrayed not only me but our child. Her abandonment was so calculated, so utterly devoid of empathy, that I still struggled to understand it. I eventually hired a private investigator, clinging to a faint hope that maybe she'd reconsider and return. But the investigator confirmed what I feared. She and Garrett had fled the country, funded by savings she had secretly accumulated over months. With that confirmation, I had to accept the truth and take legal steps to move forward. Though her absence complicated the process, my lawyer was able to proceed with the divorce, citing her abandonment and refusal to respond to legal notices. The custody battle concluded with the court granting me sole responsibility for Gracie, as Cassandra had willingly stepped away from her parental role and was unreachable to contest the decision. The judge ruled in my favor, acknowledging that Cassandra's prolonged absence effectively nullified her parental claims. The years that followed were filled with both demanding trials and deep personal rewards. Raising Gracie on my own required extensive adjustments and sacrifices, yet each challenge was outweighed by the privilege of watching her blossom into a warm, spirited child. She became the center of my world, and I made it my mission to give her the safety and affection her mother had chosen not to provide. In her early years, Gracie rarely brought up her mother. When she did, I responded with gentle honesty suited to her age, always refraining from casting Cassandra in a negative light. I told her, truthfully, that her mother had made a difficult decision to leave when she was very young, delivering the facts without resentment or blame. As Gracie began attending school and joining extracurriculars, I often found myself the only father in spaces typically filled with mothers. Occasionally, other parents would ask about Gracie's mother, and I would explain that I was raising her alone. Our lives moved forward with quiet stability, and Gracie and I developed a profoundly close connection. She excelled in her studies, formed friendships with ease, and showed no outward signs of emotional harm due to her mother's departure. I was constantly in awe of the confident, resilient young girl she was becoming, even in the shadow of her early loss. I kept detailed records of Gracie's life, her medical files, school achievements, photos, and a thorough journal of her milestones. Initially, I did this to preserve memories, but a quiet intuition told me I might one day need to prove the life we had built together. That instinct proved to be well-founded. When Gracie turned 10, our peaceful life was shaken by a court summons. Cassandra had initiated a custody case, accusing me of obstructing her access to our daughter and preventing any contact. The allegations were shocking, but even more disturbing was the false narrative she presented. Her legal claim painted her as a mother who had stepped away temporarily to handle personal issues, accusing me of deliberately hiding Gracie and ignoring her outreach. Her parents supported her petition, offering financial backing and affidavits that claimed they had attempted to stay involved in Gracie's life but were kept at a distance by me. Their sudden involvement, after years of indifference, was transparently self-serving. The filings disclosed that Cassandra had spent the last decade living abroad. She had married and divorced a man named Garrett, and now portrayed herself as a reformed parent eager to reconnect with the daughter she had once left behind. She requested joint custody, insisting that Gracie needed her maternal influence. While I wasn't certain of the details of her split from Garrett, it was clear he was no longer in her life, perhaps prompting her return and sudden interest in our child. I was furious at the audacity of someone who had willingly vanished, now claiming victimhood and demanding a place in the life she'd abandoned. Her version of events was not just inaccurate, it was a deliberate distortion. I acted swiftly, hiring a top-tier attorney with deep experience in family law, fully aware that this case could change the course of Gracie's life. My lawyer, seasoned in high-stakes custody disputes, immediately grasped the implications of Cassandra's decade-long absence, followed by her abrupt reappearance. What followed was an emotionally grueling legal battle, unlike anything I had experienced before. Cassandra's lawyers tried to recast her as a young mother who had made a youthful error but deserved redemption. What they didn't anticipate was the depth of evidence I had gathered. 10 years' worth of records clearly showed that Cassandra had made no attempt to be part of Gracie's life. Among the evidence were the original note she left when she walked away, records of my repeated efforts to contact her through her parents, proof of her intentional move overseas, and a complete lack of communication, no calls, no cards, not a cent in support. My attorney also brought in testimony from Gracie's teachers, her pediatrician, and other community members familiar with our life, all of whom affirmed the safe, loving environment I had built and the profound bond between Gracie and me. The contrast between my consistent presence and her complete abandonment could not have been clearer. On the stand, Cassandra's story began to fall apart. Her narrative shifted. She spoke of postpartum depression, claimed she had always intended to return, and blamed me for shutting her out. But when presented with the overwhelming documentation, including her farewell letter, her claims dissolved. She had no explanation for the total silence, not a birthday message, not a single outreach in a decade. Her parents' testimonies were similarly weak. When asked about their prior remarks dismissing any responsibility for Gracie and their long-standing absence from her life, their sudden transformation into devoted grandparents rang hollow. Their motives seemed more strategic than sincere. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to assess the situation and advocate for what was best for Gracie. After conducting thorough interviews and visiting both households, the guardian submitted a report recommending that Gracie remain in the stable home she had always known. The report warned against introducing such a disruptive presence as someone who, by all accounts, was a stranger. At 10 years old, Gracie had a clear understanding of what was happening. She had no memories of Cassandra, no emotional connection, and felt uneasy at the idea of spending time with someone who had never been part of her world. The trial was long and excruciating, draining us both emotionally and mentally. But when it concluded, the final ruling felt like a resounding affirmation of the life Gracie and I had built together. When Cassandra took the stand, she aimed to portray herself as a reformed individual, someone who had overcome her past and now merited a role in her daughter's life. However, her carefully crafted image quickly unraveled during cross-examination. The facts laid bare her previous decisions, and when pressed with concrete evidence, her version of events failed to hold. The judge delivered a ruling that was both thorough and unequivocal. The court found that Cassandra, by her own prolonged inaction and disregard, had effectively forfeited her rights as a parent. It was concluded that her renewed interest in legal involvement stemmed not from concern for Gracie's welfare, but from self-interested motives, possibly even financial gain. In the end, Cassandra's parental rights were permanently revoked. The court found that her absence had been so extensive and her neglect so complete that reintroducing her into Gracie's life would only bring emotional harm. It was evident that Gracie had found a secure and nurturing home in my care, and exposing her to someone she had never known would do nothing but unsettle that stability. Alongside the termination of Cassandra's rights, the judge ordered her and her parents to cover my legal fees. The court recognized that their unfounded legal campaign had caused significant emotional and financial strain, not just to me, but more crucially, to Gracie. The legal expenses were considerable, reflecting both the complexity of the case and the professionalism of the team I had assembled. Yet the deeper significance of the outcome transcended money. This case was never just about custody. It illuminated the full history of what had occurred a decade earlier, and it validated the choices I made in raising Gracie alone. The court's recognition of the safe, loving environment I had built for her brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I was seeking. For years, I had quietly questioned whether I had made the right decisions in response to Cassandra's disappearance, whether someday Gracie might blame me for the absence of her biological mother. But the verdict made one thing unmistakably clear. Every choice I made was with Gracie's best interests at heart. The court's endorsement of our life together, a life defined by love, consistency, and security, meant everything. Cassandra's attempt to rewrite history and present herself as the victim crumbled in the face of undeniable documentation. The records I had preserved over the years told the real story, one of abandonment on her part and steadfast parenting on mine. This experience also became a pivotal moment for Gracie. It taught her vital lessons about responsibility, about the difference between empty words and genuine presence, and about who truly stands by you when it matters most. While the legal battle was emotionally taxing for her, it ultimately gave her clarity, both about her past and about the strength of the bond we had built. Today, Gracie is flourishing. She is confident, deeply grounded, and aware that she is valued beyond measure. The woman who had left her behind as an infant had no claim to the strong, remarkable person she had become, a person shaped by years of unwavering love and attention. As for Cassandra's parents, who once disregarded her as a burden, their involvement in the legal proceedings only served to expose their opportunism. Their sudden interest in her life was revealed for what it truly was, a self-serving gesture, not a genuine one. The entire process highlighted the vital role that documentation plays in child custody matters. The detailed records I had maintained over the years proved decisive, capturing both Cassandra's prolonged absence and my consistent active role in Gracie's life. Looking back, I've come to see that what Cassandra intended as abandonment ultimately became the start of something extraordinary. Her decision to leave opened the way for me to raise a daughter whose strength and spirit continue to inspire me. She believed she was walking away from responsibility, but in doing so, she surrendered the most meaningful part of her life. When she returned 10 years later, hoping to reclaim what she had once cast aside, she encountered a truth she hadn't anticipated. Some absences cannot be undone, and some forms of love cannot be displaced. Gracie and I emerged from this chapter stronger, our bond affirmed both in the eyes of the law and in the depth of our connection. What Cassandra's family once viewed as a burden became the greatest blessing of my life. And those who chose to walk away from her have no right to the trust, love, or loyalty she now shares with those who stayed. If you were in my place, would you have chosen another path or made the same decisions? We welcome your thoughts. If this story struck a chord with you or someone close to you, feel free to pass it along. Thank you for being part of our journey. For more stories like this, explore the rest of our channel. Until next time.